It's a very poignant day to be here in Belfast to commemorate the hunger strikers of 1981. It's special because this is the first time in 3 years we've been able to do this. It's special because we're going to go to Milltown Cemetery where 3 of the hunger strikers are buried. Bobby Sands, Joe McDonald and Kieran Doherty. And for us from Monaghan, and there's a huge crew from Cavan Monaghan here today because of course Kieran Doherty was a TD for that constituency. A phenomenal achievement at the time and a vindication that the fact that Kieran and Bobby, who was elected as MPs, were considered by the Irish people to be political prisoners. The people supported the prisoners' demands and they resisted against attempts by the British government of the time to criminalise them. So we're here today, we're buoyant, we're absolutely proud to commemorate those who gave their lives for Irish freedom, and we're very confident of the fact that we are on the road to Irish unity, that we are on the road to the Republic. So I just think it's amazing and fantastic to see such a crowd here in Belfast, and it's great to be able to tell the world that the Irish Republic and hunger strikers are still remembered with pride.
Támuid bailithe seo inniu le cibhniú ar gardias ar comradithe a fuair bás ar stal gocris sa céisiada in EJ gach do a héan. Cibhniúid cumai ar Michael Gahan agus Frank Stagg a fuair bás a Brisean assassinate ins na seachtóidí. You're all very welcome to Belfast today as we mark the 41st anniversary of our friends and comrades who sacrificed their lives in the cause of Irish freedom in the H-Blocks Long Kesh in 1981. I particularly want to extend a warm welcome to the families of the hunger strikers who are with us today. This year also marks the 46th anniversary of the death of Frank Stagg and the 48th anniversary of Michael Gahan's death, both of whom died on hunger strike in English prisons. 2022 is also the centenary of the Irish Civil War, a tragedy for the Irish nation. Republicans saw hopes of a free, united and socially just Ireland dashed. Thousands suffered imprisonment. 77 Republicans were executed officially in Free State prisons. Many more were murdered on the outside. But despite all of that, the Irish Republican ideal survived and endured. There would be another day. Less than 50 years later, a new risen generation in the north breathed new life into that ideal. And the hunger strikers in Long Kesh were exemplars of that generation. They were the generation that decided it was no longer an option to accept meekly the naked sectarianism, supremacism, discrimination and brutality of the Unionist regime and the British government and its military. We witnessed in our young lives the pogroms of 1969, the violent response of the state to civil rights protests, imprisonment without trial or due process, British Army massacres in Derry, the New Lodge, Ballymurphy, Spring Hill. The hunger strikers, like many of my generation, decided that armed resistance was the only way to bring about change. And subsequently, thousands of young Irish men and women ended up in prison, where we asserted our right to be treated as political prisoners. After a lengthy hunger strike in 1972, the British government conceded special category status, which was political status in everything but name. However, within a short space of time after that, the British began to roll out its new criminalisation strategy. They instructed their diplomats throughout the world to portray the conflict in Ireland as some sort of criminal conspiracy, and began using terminology and vocabulary associated with criminality when referring to our struggle and the people involved in the struggle. The British also decreed that no one would qualify for special category status after the 1st of March 1976, and all prisoners of whatever stripe would have to integrate and conform wear a prison uniform and do menial and degrading prison work. The Brits thought that if they could force Republican prisoners to accept criminal status, it would drive a wedge between them and the communities who supported them. They thought they would then isolate, marginalise and ultimately defeat our struggle. And the front line of this battle was to be played out in the H blocks and Armagh Women's Prison, which our enemies thought would be the breakers' yards for Irish Republican prisoners of war. The upshot of this confrontation was over 5 years of prison protest. First the blanket protest that escalated to the no-wash protest, and ultimately the hunger strikes of 1980 and 1981. Brutality, beatings and deprivation were the order of the day, and we believed the only way we could bring the situation to a head was by having a hunger strike. Some will ask if there was not an alternative to hunger strike, and the answer is yes, there was an alternative. The British government could have ended its vicious and vindictive criminalisation strategy, and the prison regime could have stopped the beatings, the brutality and the torture of naked and defenceless prisoners. They didn't. They didn't because they thought they could defeat and break us. They thought we would bend the knee, that we would eventually capitulate to their torture and brutality, that we would accept the criminalisation of our struggle against the Orange State and the British government. But they were wrong. The British hadn't factored into their strategy the centuries of prison resistance that was part of the psyche and DNA of Irish Republicans. From the Féinans in the 19th century, to Thomas Ashe and Terence McSweeney in the early 20th century, Irish Republicans held in Free State prisons during the Civil War, Sean McCaughey and his comrades in the 1940s, through to Michael Gunn and Frank Stagg in the 1970s. These were the unbowed and unbroken Irish Republicans who we in the H blocks and Armagh looked to for inspiration. Bobby, as usual, got it right about the Brits when he said, "Never in 8 centuries have they succeeded in breaking the spirit of one person who refused to be broken." To go on hunger strike is a massive decision, and it isn't just a question of whether or not you can see it through. I've always believed the hardest part was watching our families suffer as our conditions deteriorated and our bodies wasted away. So I want to pay tribute to all the families, especially those here today, for their support and their great strength and dignity. Given the enormity of the decision to go on hunger strike and face almost certain death, many people understandably want to know what motivated the men who died. And the best answer, I think, can be found in Bobby's poem, The Rhythm of Time. There's an inner thing in every one. Do you know this thing, my friend? It lies in the heart of heroes dead. It screams in tyrants' eyes. It lights the dark of this prison cell. It thunders forth its might. It is the undauntable thought, my friend, that thought that says, I'm right. Bobby, of course, was right. Bobby, of course, was right, and the other hunger strikers were right. And they all went on hunger strike with their eyes wide open. Each would have received a communication from the leadership similar to the one I got when it was my turn to join the hunger strike. When I unwrapped the comm, which was handwritten on 2 cigarette papers, the first thing I noticed was that it was addressed to volunteer Pat Sheehan. And it went on to say, "You have volunteered to go on hunger strike and have been selected to replace volunteer Kieran Doherty. By embarking on this course of action, you will be bringing the movement into direct confrontation with the enemy. So if you have any second thoughts, stand aside now, and nothing less will be thought of you. However, if you go ahead with your decision, you will be dead in 2 months. And it was as stark as that. I thought I had all the angles covered, but seeing in black and white that I would be dead in 2 months certainly rocked me back on my heels. But after gathering myself together, I wrote back and gave an assurance that I wouldn't let anyone down. I've never seen the responses of the men who died, but I imagine they all responded in their own ways in a similar fashion. It's important that we remember our comrades not just as hunger strikers, but as the real people they were, with their own personalities. Thomas McElwee was just 23 when he died. He had acquired the nickname Punchy in the blocks because of his absolute refusal to accept any ill treatment without fighting back. And on more than one occasion, he put screws on the flat of their backs. But there was also another side to Tom, a young fella full of fun and mischief. Colm Scullion, another blanket man from South Derry, I see here today with a blanket wrapped round him, wrote a chapter about Tom in the book The Comrades, which was published last year as part of the 40th anniversary commemorations. In his contribution, Colm tells the story of how, when they were on remand, he happened to mention to Tom the name of a girl he fancied but had never had the courage to ask out. Tom convinced him to write to her, promising that he would smuggle the letters out and bring back her replies. The romance blossomed as the correspondence increased until it eventually came to light that Colm's letters weren't leaving the prison and that it was actually Tom he was writing to. Colm had fallen for one of Tom's mixes, but despite that they remained firm friends. In the same book, Dan Daly, another comrade and blanket man, wrote a chapter about Martin Herson. And I didn't know Martin, I had never met him, but Dan gives us a glimpse into the character of the man. As the only prisoner in the wing in H5 not doubled up, Dan knew the next man coming into the wing would be going into the cell with him. And sure enough, when the shout went up that there was a new man on the wing, seconds later, Dan's door opened. Without hesitation, in strides Martin, hand outstretched and a big beaming smile on his face, introducing himself with a very firm handshake. "Hello, I'm Martin Herson, but they call me Herson Boy," he said. You could instantly feel the energy from him, Dan tells us. He was full of life and full of crack, and I knew at once that we would get on well together. Now when I hear Martin's name or see his picture, it's that image of him and Dan meeting for the first time that springs to my mind. Of course, all our comrades who died on hunger strike were multifaceted and multidimensional, and all were highly regarded in their own communities. For those of us involved in the prison protest and the hunger strike, 1981 is like a bad dream, but is also a period of struggle of which we can all be extremely proud. I was here at the Republican plot last summer making a video message for a GAA club in New York who were naming the road into their grounds the Bobby Sands Way. And I had my two daughters with me, Bamba, who was 9, and Fola, 5, and they were very patient as the filming was happening, and then they eventually got fed up and started running around the headstones here playing, and I could hear them laughing and shouting. And the first thing that occurred to me was Bobby's famous quote, "Our revenge will be the laughter of our children." However, as I sat beside the graves of Bobby, Joe and Kieran, and also Pat Bug McKeown, who's buried in the plot, who died prematurely as a result of complications from the hunger strike. It struck me how lucky I had been to survive the hunger strike and come out of prison and have a family. Those of the lads who had children didn't get the opportunity to see them grow up, and the others didn't have a chance to have a family. And to me that illustrates the enormity of the sacrifice that they made. In terms of the political impact of the hunger strike, we need to remember that the aim of criminalisation was to defeat the Republican struggle. So how did that work out? The Orange State has gone, Unionist domination has gone, Sinn Féin is the biggest party in the north and on the island of Ireland. And so the opposite of what was intended has come to pass. Criminalisation was defeated, and the injustice of partition and the British state in Ireland was exposed to international scrutiny as never before. By their heroism and sacrifice, the hunger strikers ensured that the cause of Irish freedom was renewed, and that now in 2022 we are closer than ever to undoing the injustice of partition and reuniting our country. Their bravery set in train a series of events that makes the momentum for political and social change unstoppable and irreversible. That momentum will carry us forward to the realisation of an Irish national democracy, a republic where the rights and identity of all our people, of whatever persuasion or background, will be accommodated and cherished. But the hunger strikers didn't die just to prove they were right. They had a vision, a belief and an idea that their suffering and deaths would lead to a better world for the rest of us. It's often said that there is nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And that time has come now. And let's all together finish the job. And just to conclude, Acharja, there are some traditions that believe that as long as a person's name is spoken, they will never be dead. And that's something that many Irish Republicans could identify with. So today here at the Republican plot, this sacred place in Belfast, we loudly and proudly speak the names of Michael Gaughan, Frank Stagg, Bobby Sands, Francis Hughes, Patsy O'Hara, Raymond McCreesh, Joe McDonald, Martin Hurson, Kevin Lynch, Keir Doherty, Tom McElwee, Mickey Devine. They were sons and brothers, some were husbands and fathers. Their families loved them, and they in turn loved their families. Some of them were Gaeilgeoirí. They were all valued members of their communities. Many were involved in the GAA. Some had been interned without trial. All of them had experienced brutality at the hands of the British state. They were blanket men, revolutionaries. All were political prisoners who died on hunger strike in British prisons. They were ordinary young men who resisted until their last breath. They are our hunger strikers and our heroes. Bur fear Croga ate a leg, and Dram is Croga ar fad, agus fuair siad bas ar son Saoirse na hÉireann.
I am a proud young Irishman, lost there since my life began, a happy boy, through green fields ran. I kept God's and man's laws. But when my age was barely 10, my country's wrongs were told again by tens of thousands marching men. My heart stood to the cause. meekly serve my time. That Britain might brand Ireland's fight, 800 years of crime. I read of centuries of strife, of cruel laws, injustice rife, and I saw now in my own young life the fruits of foreign sway. Protesters threatened, tortured, maimed, divisions nurtured, passions flame, outrage provoked, rights causes defamed. That is the conqueror's way. So while were no convicts uniform, nor meekly serve my time, that Britain might brand Ireland's fight, 800 years of crime. Descended from proud Connacht's clan, Concannon serves cruel Britain's plan. Man's inhumanity to man has spawned a trusty slave. No strangers are these bolts and locks, no new design these dark-edged blocks. Black Cromwell lives while Mason stalks, the bully taunts the brave. So while were no convicts uniform, nor meekly serve my time, that Britain might brand Ireland's fight, 800 years of crime. Does Britain need 1,000 years of protests and riots and death and tears, or will the last decade of fears of 80 decades spell an end to Ireland's agony? You hope for human dignity, or will the last of sanity be this grim edge block cell? So while we're no convicts uniform, nor meekly serve my time, that Britain might brand Ireland's fight, 800 years of crime.